Hello and welcome. It is another rousing edition of the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast. Hello, I'm Matt Michaels. Hello to Brad Trinago, who is here yet again.
Hello to Matt. Yeah, I know. I just keep showing up, and no one locks the door on me yet. So, yes, I do keep showing up.
It wasn't about locking the door. I just figured at some point you'd be done.
You just
You'd
keep
say,
showing up.
Yeah, he just, La Cucaracha over here.
You'd think
Can't
he'd
get rid of the cockroach.
you'd think he'd get the hint, but no, he just keeps showing up.
And,
yes.
and trust me, I have done my part to throw the vilest, worst content in college sports your way to make you groan and be upset, like our last podcast, but you just keep coming back for more. So I really give you great appreciation and kudos for your ability to deal with me.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, as always. Much appreciated.
Of course. You know who we will welcome? Our friends at Shelter Insurance, who power the pod. They're ranked #1 in customer satisfaction for auto insurance in the Central Region by J.D. Power 5 of the last 6 years. We're your shield. We're your shelter. Thanks also to Socket, because Socket Fiber is the fastest, most reliable internet out there. Make sure you give them a call today, 1-800-SOCKET3, or visit socket.net. Get yourself signed up. And Tiger fans, you should say aloha to Hawaiian Bros, where the island-inspired flavors are positively delicious. You'll love favorites like Huli Huli Chicken, Luau Pig, and the delectable Dole Soft Serve. Hawaiian Bros is just south of campus on Grindstone Parkway, or order at hawaiianbros.com. If you were still listening by then, after what I realized was the worst open in the history of podcasting, to say you shouldn't listen to this, Brad's back and I don't understand why. We promise we will have some fun things for you. It is the summertime, so it might be a little bit more loosey-goosey, but SEC Media Days are nigh in Big D. Now, if you would have mentioned to anybody across the southeastern part of the United States that SEC Media Days would be taking over the Omni in Dallas, a place, by the way, that Mizzou fans have been familiar with over very recent vintage, you would say, okay, come back when you're not on hallucinogenic substances. But no, it's there. And now we have 16 participants. It will be a mob show. I, for one, think that we have a lot to discuss when it actually comes to the goings-on of Dallas. Some of it is serious and some of it is not so serious.
Some of it certainly is not serious, but on a closer to serious note, it is certainly strange, and it's going to take some adjusting to remember, oh, yeah, Oklahoma and Texas are back in the fold now. But when you look at what's happening around college football starting this fall, having the Southeastern Conference's media days in Dallas doesn't seem as strange as, say, the Big 12 media days in Las Vegas, and you've got people from Orlando, Florida, who are conference schools that are flying to Las Vegas for their own conference's media days, and they may have longer trips coming up for conference games. And when you think of it from that perspective, it's not quite as weird.
Did you see that the Pac-12, again, which is still an existing entity with 2 member schools who are trying to work out this whole muddled thing we call college athletics, the reporters basically said that they held an open bar?
Yes, I did see that.
They went to the bar and said, well, we've got 2 of us, and so we've got a little stage. We'll have our question time, and, enjoy yourselves.
SEC was, that's going to be in a giant ballroom, convention center, whatever, like usual. The Big 12's media days was where the Raiders play in Las Vegas in that football stadium, and it looked like the Pac-12's media day was in a room roughly the size of the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast studios.
Just about. Well, everybody's putting it in one place because they want everybody to be sure they can cover it, right? The SEC, the Big Ten, all right, everybody's going to go, we know, but I mean, to some degree, you got to worry about where your pecking order is in all of this. And that applies, by the way, to these teams who are coming in to SEC Media Days in Dallas. Missouri, by the way, speaks on day number 2. We don't really do as many hot takes as we once did on the podcast, even though we advertise them all the time. Get your hot takes here on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast. I will start with a hot take right here, Bradley. I will give you a guarantee that Tuesday will feature a team that plays in the SEC championship game this year.
Okay.
At least one.
Give me the list of the schools on Tuesday again.
The list of the schools on Tuesday, I had it. We know that Missouri is one. Actually, I do have it. Georgia is another.
Okay.
Oklahoma is one, and Tennessee is one. One of those 4 schools, I will say at least one of those 4 schools, because I see a possibility of 2. One of them will be playing in Atlanta when we get to it in December.
You know what's so fascinating about that is that the initial thought, I'm sure, is, well, duh, Georgia's talking on Tuesday. So, of course, one of the 2 is going to be there. But the reality is that the conference has just gotten even bigger. So now it's 16 teams. So just on aggregate, your odds have dropped a little bit of making the conference championship game just because there were more people fighting for one of those two spots now. And also, Georgia's schedule is vicious. So Georgia could be the best team in the SEC and not make the conference championship game just because a team that is a little worse has a more advantageous schedule. So that there's a real possibility there. And could Mizzou be one of those teams that takes advantage of the way that the schedule has fallen? Certainly a possibility. I mean, Oklahoma was a 10-win team a year ago, but their schedule is insane. So it's hard for me to see them breaking through. And then where's Tennessee at? Obviously a new quarterback who's been extremely highly hyped, but where are they going to land when all this plays out too? I mean, it's going to be a really fascinating. It's always a fascinating year for SEC football, but throwing Oklahoma and Texas in there and just having these heavyweight fights every single week, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Can I say that the odds increase that one of those teams makes it because two of them don't have to play Missouri this season? And the one that does, if Oklahoma came to Columbia, and I'll call it a little bit of a stunner over Missouri, considering the way history had gone in more recent vintage between the two, I would say that that's a really good Oklahoma team if they can come to Columbia and win. I know there's a lot to be decided, but just looking at the big picture, I see this as maybe one of the stronger days in terms of the teams that will be featured in the 4 days. And for Missouri, the questions will be asked, well, do you think I mean, it's not unreasonable to me to have someone stand up and say, do you think you're a contender to play for the SEC championship this season? Because Missouri's not been shy about saying their goal for this season is the college football playoff. That is not just an externality. That is not just people looking at schedules and saying Missouri might have a more favorable one than some of the teams you mentioned in the league. Eli Drinkwitz and company are going to get these questions, right? And I think the answers can be fairly said, well, yeah, that has to be a goal for our team this year because, A, if you do that, if you make it to Atlanta, you're in the playoff. There's no doubt about that.
Well, and I think if you look at it, if you were able to make pollsters and voters and pundits or whatever blind to the jersey, and you just said, here is Team X. Team X plays in the best conference in college football. Team X went 11-2 last year with their only losses on the road against Georgia and against the Heisman Trophy winner. They were two competitive losses. They beat Ohio State in a bowl game. They bring back, I would say, the majority of their best players, including their quarterback, including maybe the best wide receiver in the nation who's returning. If you just told somebody that, it's like, okay, here's a team that won 11 games last year, all their two losses were legit, and they bring back most of their best players, including their quarterback. Mm-hmm. I think most people would say, oh, yeah, that's a top 10 team and a playoff team for sure. But you put, again, this is me being a lifelong Missourian and a lifelong Mizzou fan. You say it's Mizzou, and then people are like, oh, yeah, I know they finished top 10 last year, but they're going to be they're going to be preseason like 20th. You know that when the SEC preseason stuff comes out later this week during media days that, there's a good chance Brady Cook's not going to be, an all SEC preseason guy. It's, and that's the type of stuff that Mizzou is trying to overcome. And I say overcome, but it's not like it matters. I mean, what matters is what ends up happening on the field. But what Mizzou did on the field last year and what Mizzou is apparently doing on the recruiting trail right now that we can't quite talk about yet, but I think we're going to be able to in a couple of months and get really excited about. I think that it's starting to shift some perceptions of where Mizzou really is at in the college football pecking order.
Yeah, they're at a place well positioned right now. Bill Connolly, a friend, of course, of Missouri fans everywhere, who does SP Plus for ESPN, broke down all the returning production, and Missouri is a top 20 team in the nation in returning production. They get like 70+% of their production back next season. And generally, in college sports, the older teams or the more experienced teams get that advantage, and Missouri is going to be one of those teams, certainly on offense, with the exception of, and I think the number one question that people will ask is, what does an offensive line look like now that has lost very good talent to the NFL, but also brought in very good talent as well in the transfer portal. That is a unit that helped drive the bus, that helped turn the outside zone that Eli Drinkwitz has wanted to run well forever into the most potent weapon with Cody Schrader toting the rock that it has been in Coach Drink's time in Columbia. And you added Caden Green, right? And Oklahoma fans were not very happy about that and still a little bit salty about that. Then Marcus Bryant said, yes, I will come from SMU and make this my home. And he was, a top 200 transfer, certainly in the country, and a big, big man. Those guys didn't come to sit on the bench, you guess, so they probably slot in. And you have to, you got to replace Foster and Delgado. That is not an easy task. And the number one thing that Missouri can do to give itself success this next season, I think, is to fill in those spots and have them be as stable as they were last year. If I was there asking the questions, I'd be asking all my questions about the offensive line.
This episode of Mizzou Storytellers on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast is brought to you by Shelter Insurance. Ranked number 1 in customer satisfaction for auto insurance in the Central Region by J.D. Power 5 out of the last 6 years. We're your shield. We're your shelter.
Well, the cliche is that the SEC is a line of scrimmage league, right? So I think that its offensive line, honestly, I almost think I'm a little more curious about what things are going to look like on the defensive line, even more than the offensive line. And I totally agree with you that, to me, the three biggest question marks I may have, and it's not disrespecting what Cody Schrader did and what Cody Schrader accomplished, but it might be, in some order, Javon Foster, Xavier Delgado, and Darius Robinson. What Darius Robinson brought to this team, not just the fact that he was so productive that he ended up being a first-round NFL draft pick, but also that leadership aspect up front. You take those guys out, and it's tough for us who don't play the game or haven't played the game at such a high level to really appreciate everything that a good offensive lineman or a good defensive lineman does. It's hard to measure that. There's a lot going on in a football game. It's a lot easier to be like, oh, that quarterback's good because he can throw a 40-yard pass, into a very small window. But, how much does losing Javon Foster from the offensive line mean? And really, how much does losing Darius Robinson from the defensive line mean for this team? So, yeah, the things I'm most curious about for this team are how things look up front. I think the way that the schedule sets up for Mizzou is really good because it hopefully, knock on wood, gives you a few weeks to kind of settle in and figure out, especially on the offensive line where chemistry can be so important. It gives you a few weeks to try and sort all that out before you get into some really heavy-hitting games in October and November.
Yeah, and I'll also say this. I'll make a bold prediction. One of Marcus Carroll or Nate Noel will be fine. Like, as long as they're healthy, you talk about Cody Schrader being a key part of the offense. I'm really not that concerned between Noel being near the top of Appalachian State's list in terms of just putting himself in the record books, and Carroll's a 1,300-yard rusher last season. I think between one of those two, you're going to have someone emerge as a primary option. And if you don't and they get a true timeshare, that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. I think effectiveness there will occur as long as you have the offensive line, again, gelled and in place, and able to find people to step up maybe into roles where they're going to see more time, because that happens to every college football team.
Right, and that's part of why I was saying that I wouldn't put Cody Schrader in my top three people. Oh, my gosh, you've got to replace him because of the success that the team has had in the portal. And also, a guy like Jamal Roberts, St. Louis guy who it's been waiting his turn for an opportunity to play at running back. And Kawan Lacey's gotten a lot of hype coming in. He's a true freshman, so we'll see. Sometimes it takes a minute to get adjusted to this level, but it seems like there's a lot of talent in that running back room.
I also wonder if someone will be asking Coach Drinkwitz, like, do you see success as being, improvement at every position this year? Because it's going to be difficult to say that at every single position across the field you got better from a team that went 11-2. Like, at some point you reach maintenance. Like, that's what Saban was so good at Alabama, was maintenance and restocking. And yes, got a lot of talent. When you're trying to start out and establish yourself on a level with some of those players, which I think Missouri is trying to do, certainly the recruiting game, if you follow it in recent months, has done that. you need to be able to prove that you can do it again. And sometimes you have to do that by taking a few weeks to, figure it out. And there will probably be some sort of scenario in some sort of game. I'll even call it. I'll say somewhere in the Vanderbilt game, someone's going to get really nervy and ready to hit the panic button because Vanderbilt hung around for too long or whatever the case may be. Or maybe it is a fourth quarter game. You never know in the league. But when you meet that first moment, are you able to, as a team, go past it? Missouri got that against Kansas State last year, right? They saw that moment, they met it, and they moved past it, and it equipped them for what was to come. So in some realm, you've got to grow up together. And how they do that, to your point, in the first several weeks is going to be really important. And how they do that with a team that's still finding out exactly what it is, because I think all teams are doing that in the first few weeks, is going to be important.
I don't think you can have a one-for-one replacement for a guy like Darius Robinson,
No.
a first-round NFL draft pick. Mizzou is working again on the recruiting trail. It seems like they're trying to, and the transfer portal, they're trying to build up to a point where you can at least get close to saying, hey, we've got people on the talent level to where, yeah, you lose a guy like a D-Rob and you slide somebody in and you don't miss much of a beat, maybe a little bit of it, but not a lot. And also, let's not forget, you lost two, NFL caliber defensive backs at corner. So you brought in a lot of talent. I mean, Toriano Pride is a regional guy who certainly had a lot of hype coming out of high school and has some major college reps for sure. But you don't know until they go up against some of these big shots in the SEC how things are going to look in the secondary as well. So there's always going to be questions. That's just the reality of the game at every school. You'll lose some key contributors to the NFL draft or the transfer portal or whatever. What does it look like going forward? But man, I like the position Mizzou is in better than almost any other team in the nation, which is a really exciting thing to say.
Is there a question you think will be asked of Coach Drinkwitz and or the players there at Media Days that isn't really a question? Like, in your mind, you see this is not really something that we're going to leave as like, oh, I don't know.
Well, we know as journalism school, graduates that these media members don't always ask questions the way they're supposed to. So to literally answer your question, yes, they'll just say some random periods and sentence fragments, and then Eli's supposed to have to respond to that.
I'll make another bold prediction here, and you can blame me. I don't believe in jinxes and curses, but you can blame me if things don't go as smoothly as you like. Someone will ask a question about Blake Craig being ready to take over the kicker's role, and I think that question will be proven as not a question in time. Okay. I think he's going to be all right.
I like that.
It's
a great point, too. I mean, that's
everything that we've heard about the strength of the leg is there. And I think that's the number one thing you can worry about is, can you, in modern college football, can you hit a 50-yarder? Because the teams that can't are at a disadvantage. Missouri has been a team for the past couple of seasons, especially, that always could. I think that Blake Craig can do that. And if you can at least get me to, can you try a 50-yard field goal and hit it, then I think you've taken care of much of that question.
Yeah, it's a great point. And there's still a lot of media members, even within the SEC, footprint, that are trying to get to know Mizzou because they haven't really been paying attention, obviously. And so I think you'll see that in the preseason voting. I think you'll see that in some of the questions that are asked, which I think will generally be around the frame of, seriously, you won 11 games and beat Ohio State, but you're Mizzou. How can you
That's
possibly...
That's not pessimistic at all.
How can you possibly do that again?
In Brad's view.
It'll all be... It won't be said, but it'll be said indirectly, which is fine. Again, none of this... This is all just an excuse to talk about college football because we love college football, and we're obviously ready for it and fired up, as you can tell.
It is talking season, and I think that you can make a safe assumption that Coach Drink will say something. Last year, he didn't really want to say a lot. This year, I think he'll go out and he'll feel a little bit more comfortable, and he'll say something that'll make someone upset.
You go 11-2 and beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, you should feel pretty comfortable.
You should. You should say something. Why not? Let other people worry about that stuff. Have some fun.
Tiger fans, say aloha to Hawaiian Bros, where the island-inspired flavors are positively delicious. You'll love favorites like Huli Huli Chicken, Luau Pig, and the delectable Dole Soft Serve. Hawaiian Bros, just south of campus on Grindstone Parkway, or order at hawaiianbros.com.
Speaking of fun, I know that you, Bradley, have been really hard at work on what's the most important thing that will come out of 16 teams now being in this SEC stew down in Dallas. At a time that across the pond, great things will be happening with great athletes, some with Missouri ties, by the way. In Old Paris, the Olympic Games are here, and because we are weirdos, we thought, well, mainly you, because I want to give you the credit, what if we tried to assign the mascots, fan bases, teams of the Southeastern Conference to different Olympic events? Could we do this in a way that is enlightening and entertaining and in all ways accurate, in which everyone will agree on the answer?
Of course. This was a collaborative effort. There were a couple times where I did some additional research, and that led me to make the executive decision to move some sports around. Because I know that a lot of the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast listeners immediately are like, what about fencing? We've got to talk about fencing. It's been long overdue on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast.
Yeah.
We made some changes regarding fencing since we previously spoke about this, Matt. So I'll go ahead. I'll reveal that to you along with the rest of the folks on the air here in a couple of minutes.
I think I know what caused you to make this executive decision. If we have not, and we have not yet, and we may at some point, if we have not had the one-on-one with members of your national championship Mizzou chess team yet, how could we jump to fencing before chess?
That's a fair point. But if you're ready, Matt, we can go ahead and begin.
Yes,
with
let's.
the best Olympic events for each SEC school. I'm gonna for Mizzou, off the top for Mizzou, we're gonna cop out of this because the assumption is that Truman the Tiger would win gold in every event.
Yes,
and it's just disrespectful to the other SEC mascots for him to enter. We want to give, especially in this new year, this new era for the conference, we want to be collaborative and friendly and in the spirit of competition, give everybody at least an opportunity to win something more than a participation trophy. So, theoretically, it'd be like the decathlon, just because Truman is so good at everything. It would be like, that year back in the 70s when East Germany was on all the drugs at the Olympics, like all the drugs, like every drug that was available, they just put it in a cauldron and just drank it, and then they were beating people by like 100 yards in a swimming event and stuff. It would look like that in terms of the margin of the result.
Even though Truman is no doper.
Truman would never, obviously. I'm just saying it would look like that
because he's so superior to all the other. I mean, I can understand that. If you want to make a cop-out, you could say that Truman has already proven that he is athletically superior. It's like when Jordan retired the first time. There were many reasons, but Jordan retired and he eventually played baseball. He was too good for the game. So if Truman's too good for the game, maybe he lights the Olympic torch.
There you go. Okay, so Truman will light the Olympic torch. That's a great idea. So in this scenario, which again is the best Olympic event designated for each SEC school / mascot / fan base. All right, so we'll go alphabetically with Alabama, and we're going to assign boxing to Alabama because, they've been the heavyweight in the conference, if you will, for a while. They've packed the biggest punch for a while. Plus, elephants already have trunks. Get it? Boxing, trunks, and elephant.
I reluctantly get it.
Okay. So that's where we're at. Sorry, there's only 14 more to go. Just bear with me. Arkansas. I have moved fencing to Arkansas, and I will tell you why. During the first year, Arkansas was a university in the 1870s. A student was wounded by a knife in an argument over a math problem. So it's in the school's blood, literally, to do, knife / sword related things. So we're going to go with fencing.
Okay. So they fought over mathematics, which again, you can prove and disprove. It's a cut and dried thing. Your math was either right or it was proven to be wrong. And we just decided at Arkansas in the 1870s, we'd get a little stabby over that.
Yes. Arkansas comes to Columbia for football this fall, but keep in mind the next time you go to Fayetteville, you should say 2 + 2 = 5 or you will get stabbed. Just FYI. That precedent was set in the 1870s.
Don't ask him to, try to create a tangent or anything. Just leave it there in the dust.
Yeah.
Don't provoke a feral hog.
Yeah, don't sign.
We know that for many reasons.
Do not sign or co-sign. Absolutely. Moving on to Auburn, we're going to assign them the trampoline because of all the ups and downs that Auburn has. Boing, up, down, boing.
I can,
stuff.
yeah, yes.
Does that work for you?
The highs are high, and if you were to reach a low that was beneath the trampoline, that would be very low. That would be a major accident and actually very sad.
Yeah. Do you ever play crack the egg when you were a kid on trampolines?
No. What,
so you
what
roll
is
up.
this?
You basically roll up into a ball. So you're lying down on the trampoline, and you wrap your arms around your knees basically, and you're in a ball almost like an egg shape. And then everybody else is like jumping and bouncing you into the air and trying to get you to come out of that position, like cracking the egg.
Is playing a lot of crack the egg the reason we have this list on today's Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast?
It's possible. Actually, we back in my day, this is back, and you should absolutely not do this at home, kids. But we actually just played. It was like Royal Rumble style, like last person still on the trampoline won, and we would just get kicked off. You would just knock each other off into the yard.
So we've learned that Brad's mind is wired in interesting ways because of trampoline action, and we've also learned that the trampoline manufacturers now almost universally put nets around them when they sell them to you because of what Brad and company did in their youth.
That's how we rolled in rural Randolph County, Missouri. Yes, absolutely. And Auburn, of course, you would play crack the War Eagle egg. You wouldn't just play crack the egg.
Yeah.
This episode of Mizzou Storytellers on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast is brought to you by Sophia's and Addison's Restaurants. Sophia's and Addison's Restaurants are great local spots to visit before or after all Mizzou home games. Addison's has 2 locations in Southwest and downtown Columbia and features over 20 beers on tap, including local brewers and, of course, their famous Nachos Bianco. So remember, before or after the game, stop by Addison's.
I wouldn't want to mess with an Eagle's egg, though, because if Mama's around, I'm not going to be a party to that.
That's a great call. All right, best Olympic events for SEC schools. We continue with Florida, their Gators. Obviously, we're looking for something water-related. Let's go with marathon swimming. That's going to be in the River Seine in Paris this year. Water quality, according to news reports, may not be the best, so the Gators' past experience in swamps could really come into play here.
That's true. You don't know what's in that swamp. I mean, it could be anything. It could even be another swamp.
It ain't gonna just be baguettes that are in there.
No, I don't think so. I think there have been years of industrial processes in France to say, nah, pack a mouth filter.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't swallow that water. It's not gonna be ideal. All right, for Georgia, we're gonna go with rugby sevens. You got to be very low to the ground to succeed in rugby, and the low man wins, or in this case, the low dog wins because they're already, UGA's already way down there.
Very muscular. Yes, I agree with that. Now, we have 2 different sets of Bulldogs, and Georgia has taken rugby sevens. So, we're just going to have to find out. It could get interesting.
Stay tuned. That's a tease in the business, folks, for what Mississippi State will be assigned, since Georgia is rugby sevens. Kentucky, yes, there's basketball in the Olympics, but that would be too easy to do that. So let's go with sport climbing instead, because according to the simply named facts.net, Wildcats are skilled climbers.
I'm so glad that you gave a citation for a website called facts.net. Facts.net, : it couldn't possibly be wrong.
It's right in the name. It can't possibly be false. Wildcats, skilled climbers, already there.
They are. I understand that. I don't want to. The facts.net, if you want to be a sponsor, I will say all the nice things about you that you want here on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast.
Now, with that being said, they're going to need some chalk and carabiners to move up the SEC standings this fall. But
they might need a little bit. They might need a stoop to sit on.
Very nice.
As they take a breather, then the top.
Final school in the first half of the expanded SEC and the Olympic events they've each been assigned. LSU, I went with modern pentathlon because the event makes no sense, and sometimes LSU, both their sports and their fans, are just bizarre and crazy, and they make no sense. So to me, those two seem like a good fit.
Are you saying that Brad Trinago's logical brain cannot comprehend chandeliers at tailgates?
Exactly. That's one great example, of which there are many, including, former coaches that ate the grass and things like that. Can you name even one sport in modern pentathlon? I will give you props for how many you can name, because I would have named, I believe, 0.
Let me think about this. Well, I do believe that, well, no, because biathlon in the winter is shooting and cross-country skiing, like
That is
rifle
correct.
and cross-country
That is
skiing.
correct.
But I don't believe rifle is a part of modern pentathlon, even though,
Rifle is not.
yeah, but there is. I do think archery is.
Incorrect.
Oh, man, not archery? I thought that there was some sort of shooting sport in there.
There is. It's pistol shooting,
The pistol.
obviously.
Yeah.
When you think Olympics, you think pistol shooting.
Mm-hmm.
You want
as I would.
you give
Keep
up.
that heart rate down.
You want me to give you the other 4, or do you want to still take a crack at it?
It's going to be there's a weird running event in there, and then there's other weird. I want to hear them all because I need to remember this.
Very good. Modern pentathlon coming soon from Paris. Pistol shooting, as we mentioned. Fencing. The one touch, is it épée? I don't know how to pronounce it. The one touch épée variety of fencing. Freestyle swimming. Cross country running, and of course, equestrian show jumping.
Oh, I forgot all about the equestrian.
Modern pentathlon.
Was modern pentathlon, that was an original like 1890 whatever
Almost.
Greek Olympic game,
Or
right?
it was like the 19 teens is when it started.
Because again, that's what made, and unfortunately, bad history, but that's what made a man back when they were doing it, right? Like you got to be able to shoot, and you got to be able to ride a horse and run and swim. And I'm very glad that women are included now, and those are outdated very clearly because I don't think that, aside from certain persons who might need it, pistol shooting is not, going to be your everyday activity, nor is show jumping.
So there you go. Modern pentathlon in effect. That's half the SEC. We still have to get, obviously, Matt, to surfing and breakdancing. So do you want to do that now, or should we talk about some of our
I'm just still getting over
lovely
the fact that you dared to suggest that LSU, by taking part in a basket of crazy events, could in any way be interpreted as a basket of crazy. I'm still getting over that. No, why don't we take a timeout? It will not be crazy when you hear from our friends at Shelter Insurance, and then the rest of this great list about the Olympics and the schools of the SEC. So stay with us.
This episode of Mizzou Storytellers on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast is brought to you by Raceline Alternative Energy. Raceline Alternative Energy is working for a better future in rural Missouri. They are working to restore millions of acres of native prairie plants, which can be harvested to produce highly valuable clean energy called prairie power. Visit them online at racelinealternativeenergy.com.
And the podcast is also powered by Sophia's at Addison's Restaurants. Great local spots to visit before or after all Mizzou home games. Addison's has 2 locations in Southwest and downtown Columbia and features over 20 beers on tap, including local brewers and, of course, the famous Nachos Bianco. So remember, before or after the game, stop by Addison's. Also, thanks to Raceline Alternative Energy, working for a better future in rural Missouri. They are working to restore millions of acres of native prairie plants, which can be harvested to produce highly valuable clean energy called prairie power. Visit them online at racelinealternativeenergy.com.
If you need an alternative energy source to boost your ability in fencing, freestyle swimming, equestrian show jumping, pistol shooting, and or cross-country running, you really should head to the prairies. Hit up your friends at Raceline.
And not the same sort of alternative energy source that may or may not be lingering in the River Seine.
Right, exactly.
That's a different alternative energy source, not the type that Raceline is focused on. You can draw your own conclusions.
Indeed. So we continue with the best Olympic events for each SEC school at the Paris Olympics. And, of course, we're going to go to Tahiti. Ole Miss, one of the mascots is the land shark, so we can do some surfing here with a shark of some sort. Granted, it is a land shark, but still, the fact that it has feet might help with the surfing.
Yeah, I think that this makes sense. I mean, it would need feet to surf. I also think that if it did not have feet, sharks and surfers, that's a tale as old as time, right? Even though it might be like a bit of a malaprop. Not a malaprop, but it might not be actually true.
You're going to need a bigger boat. I got you.
Yeah, you might need a bigger boat for that. And also, I mean, with full respect, and certainly our thoughts are with Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss after the death of his father, Monty Kiffin, just very recently within the past week, who was a great of the game of football in terms of certainly establishing his defense. But I say that because I will mention that Lane Kiffin is a good cultural fit, I think, for surfing in Tahiti.
That's also an excellent point. He's also been riding a wave in the transfer portal the last couple of years.
That he has.
And has, according to our friend over at Phil Steele, philsteele.com, he has 20 starters back, and he's had all that success in the portal. So this really, as much from a Mizzou perspective, we're talking about, hey, this stuff might be really lining up for it to be Mizzou's year. I think the folks in Oxford are thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So surfing, yeah, you get to go to France this year, which is really Tahiti.
All right, time to pay off the tees like we do in the biz. Mississippi State, we mentioned that our previous Bulldog from Georgia got rugby sevens because it's so low to the ground. For Mississippi State, we're going to go with a slightly different sport, rhythmic gymnastics, because rhythmic gymnastics requires a prop, and it also requires a prop to go to Bulldog football games, the cowbell.
Yes, if you don't have a cowbell, you're out of place. You can wear maroon and white. If you don't have your cowbell, you're lost.
I'm picturing a tiny woman in sequins tossing a cowbell in the air, doing a front flip, and then catching it and continuing to dance to like the Mississippi State fight song.
Yeah, what are those apparatus? Like there's like it's not the hula hoop, it's like the ring.
Yeah, there's like a ring.
There's the ribbon.
There's a ball too.
There is a ball.
I don't know.
Isn't there a fourth?
There might be a fourth, but yes, those are three of the examples that you can use.
I'm just trying to think of which of those is most like a cowbell.
I guess in this case, in terms of the density or whatever, it would be the ball. You're just something you could toss in the air.
But it can't make any sound.
And then retrieve.
I also see clubs, ribbon, and rope. So maybe it's like the clubs, like if you get like two bowling pins together.
Okay.
Like that would make sense to me.
Very good. So that's Mississippi State, rhythmic gymnastics. Oklahoma is who we have assigned the newest Olympic sport. Breaking is what they call it. It was like break dancing. And we went with this, breaking and Oklahoma, because the Sooner Schooner knows all about breaking from the incident in 2019 when it wheeled out there and then it had to be carted off because it tipped over and fell. Kind of did a spin on its head briefly as it landed if you rewatch the video. So they've already gotten some reps for this new Olympic event.
By the way, I do not know for sure if breaking is going to continue. I think it is just one of those, hey, we've got it this year and we will see if it continues in the future. Which I don't think Oklahoma wants to be used as a metaphor. And if any Sooner fans are listening to this podcast, hate listening to it because of all the things that have happened in recruiting and stuff like that, and you just heard us say, well, it's because this might also be only a 4-year cycle, that would make people really mad, so we won't say something like that as a comparison to breaking.
And we certainly won't clip this part for social or anything like that. That would be inappropriate.
No, the Sooner Schooner falling over is always it for other college football fans, it is always a great gift to go back.
And speaking of a potential crash, Oklahoma football's schedule at Mizzou also includes Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU.
Welcome,
friends.
I still think, and I've said this to other people, I think that Oklahoma is better equipped across all sports to have success year one in the Southeastern Conference than our friends at Texas.
The defending Learfield Directors Cup champions from Texas? You think
Yes.
Oklahoma's even better off?
I think Oklahoma is better positioned because I feel like they more regularly compete at the top in just about everything. Now, granted, Texas volleyball, national champions last year. It's not that there isn't a high standard to be set. It's not that they weren't in the college football playoff last season. I'm not saying that. I just think that in what this 365-day-a-year competition is in the Southeastern Conference, you don't get one day off. And I think Oklahoma will grasp that better than Texas will.
Okay. That's something else to file away. Matt is firing the takes out. Matt is ready for football. He's antsy.
It's talking season.
Yeah.
Who's going to come get me? Nobody can come get me on this right now. Like, we got to wait to see.
I like it. Moving on as we continue with the best Olympic sport for each SEC school. We're going to go to South Carolina. We're going to go badminton. They're the Gamecocks. You play badminton with a shuttlecock. Let's not overthink this.
This is a slam dunk.
Yep.
And, on occasion, you travel in excess of hundreds of miles per hour, and then you come to a soft landing.
I feel like Gamecocks, too, they have the kind of jittery, right? They got the sudden movements that you need for badminton, so I feel like
badminton is like nightmare fuel. Like, when you watch it at the Olympics coming up, like, you will not understand how they react as quickly as they do. And then it's like an instant of reaction, and then if for some reason it goes deep, it's like, oh, and now we went in slow motion all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's quite the sport to catch every 4 years. Tennessee, we're going to assign rowing. The Vol Navy famously has hundreds of boats that dock along the river near Neyland Stadium for a massive floating tailgate party, and boats of all kinds are welcome, so you could sneak a canoe in there. Plus, I feel like Smokey would make an excellent coxswain.
Yes. Is it coxswain? Is it coxswain? I don't know. Like, because boat terminology is really weird. Like, ask a Vanderbilt Commodore. Like, you can have a boatswain, but it's pronounced bosun.
Interesting.
So I'm not entirely sure of the terminology. All I know is there are other characters across the league who could be qualified to row. For instance, Texas has a women's rowing team on campus, but Bevo ain't going to be the best when it comes to weight distribution, and Smokey will be just fine.
That's a phenomenal point. That and leadership is a key part. The coxswain is the guy who's facing backwards and like basically the coach
Keeping people
on the
in
boat
time. Yes.
and is kind of steering it. And we saw a few years back that Texas Georgia bowl game where Bevo kind of charged into Uga, and you can't have that kind of irrational decision making when you're the coxswain. Right, so I feel like again, Smokey would be a better choice, and you got to get the cadence down when you're doing it, so you can just be like bark, 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 bark whenever it's time.
Yeah,
to go.
if you've got a good tempo with barking, you're solid gold.
Very important. On to Texas, and the Olympic sport for Texas is, of course, judo, because Texas is all about leverage and throwing your weight around, and judo also about leverage and throwing your weight around.
No notes.
Moving on, Texas A&M, artistic or synchronized swimming. It requires lots of coordinated movements and pageantry. There's lots more happening under the surface than you'd think with both Texas A&M and artistic swimming.
Yeah, and a lot of people will know this as synchronized swimming. It's technically called artistic swimming. But yes, think about A&M. And think about what it takes to get a bunch of people to lock arms and say, no matter who you are or what walk of life you are in, I'm going to act with you in a manner to saw off the horns of my foe. And I will do this at any time, any place, whenever the music. I mean, yes. If you think about that, there is stuff happening underneath that maybe you don't understand. And on top, it all looks like it's one big. I will agree with this.
And if there's surface level issues with the pool and it overflows, you may have to bail out some of the water. And the Aggies know, of course, all about bailouts. One more?
I can only imagine that if we have the opportunity and do not get the hook from off stage, that we should finish it strong.
So obviously, if you're thinking about finishing strong, you think about Vanderbilt. And we're going to go with sailing. We'll take the easy way out here because Cornelius Vanderbilt, built his wealth in part via shipping, so he knows his way around the water. So that's a nice, smooth.
But see, he was a railroad magnate.
Well, it was both. He obviously railroad magnate, and he also did a lot of stuff in terms of inland shipping, rivers and waterways and stuff. He also built some of his wealth there.
And see, we can't use, Quiz Bowl is not an official, Olympic sport. If
not
it
yet.
Was, we could probably go that way.
That's true.
Right?
Did you also know that Cornelius Vanderbilt had 13 kids? So the ladies must have liked the cut of his jib.
No, I did not.
Jib being a type of sail.
That one was actually really good.
Thank you.
That one was really good. I wonder how many others will be there tracking with you, but I am tracking with you on cut of his jib and sailors and everything. Now, here's the thing, okay? How hard was it? I presume that fencing was here because every Commodore must have a cutlass of some sort.
Yes, we did.
So how hard was it to assign that instead to the Razorbacks?
I was struggling to find something for Arkansas, and I saw that story about someone getting knifed over a math problem, and I was like, oh, yeah, we got to work that in.
Just in case you tuned into the end of the podcast before the start of the podcast, a math problem caused a knifing in Arkansas in the 1870s on campus. That's all you need to know.
And Matt, this has been the best Olympic event for each SEC school.
I can't imagine people will be upset with those. There's no way.
Good stuff. We really don't have really the only thing we have to actually talk about besides, hey, it's SEC Media Days and football people are going to talk about football things. The SEC preseason volleyball poll was released last week. You mentioned Texas, the two-time defending national champs, they're number one. But you go down just a little bit, and you see Mizzou coming off that tremendous improvement under then first-year head coach Don Sullivan. They're number 6. Jordan Iliff, local kid, preseason All-SEC. I think there's a lot of optimism for Mizzou volleyball coming up this fall.
I mean, that's quite a leap from first year coming in, and the coaches around the league are like, okay, let's see, and for good reason. Everybody was a little bit like, okay, let's see. The program had struggled in previous years to get any consistency in the league, and Missouri was an NCAA tournament team last season under Don Sullivan's leadership, and now with Iliff returning, with new pieces coming in, with a full year under the belt, how can that be taken forward? And I would argue that SEC volleyball last season was maybe the strongest it's been in a decade and a half. So to see Missouri get that level of respect and say, okay, we're going to make you a preseason number 6, I think speaks wonders about the job that Don Sullivan has done to quickly re-establish Missouri at a place that I think Missouri fans would expect the program to be coming into a season, which is the top half of the table with opportunities to really do some special things.
And as we record this podcast, we're a little over a month away from the first chance for you to check out Mizzou volleyball, the black and gold scrimmage coming up August 18th. It'll be here soon.
Almost too soon. I don't even...
It's not too soon, man. I'm ready. Let's do this.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of fun this fall, absolutely. We'll have it here on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast, too. But, can I get just a little sliver more of summer? Just a little teensy, weensy bit? Can I get, one more cookout going, or am I done with those?
You can have... I will allow one cookout of, you can't go, full out with, one of the huge grills, but you can throw some burgers and brats on a grill one time, and then it's go time.
Is feral hog allowed on the menu?
It's encouraged.
Only in the 1870s. I'm never going to forget that. All right. Thank you so much for listening to a summarized edition of the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast. We hope you enjoy Media Days. I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about when Coach Drink and company are done with their speaking, and once we actually get to camp, which, you think about things that are close. Mizzou will be in football camp within the next 3 weeks, realistically, from the time you hear this podcast. So we look forward to all of that, certainly, for a much-anticipated season. Biggest thanks today goes to Andrew Bristow for putting up with our stuff and also being our producer behind the scenes on this edition. For Brad Trinago, I am Matt Michaels. Thank you so much. We will be here with you next time on the Inside Mizzou Athletics podcast.